Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. I'm your host, Clayton Fletcher, here in fabulous Las Vegas. Finally, not flying solo. Appreciate you guys, bearing with me as I talk to myself for an hour each week. And today, I'm very happy to announce that I will not be doing that because joining me live in my hotel room in Treasure Island Casino, which is really nice, like underrated property, is a voice that most of you, if not all of you, will recognize. He is one of the main lead commentators for PokerGo and Poker Central. He also is involved in, I don't even know how many podcasts, we'll let him tell us. And he even has a new game show coming out.
Yeah.
So please welcome for the first time on the TPE podcast, my friend, Jeff Platt.
Clayton, it is good to be here. I listen to the show on a weekly basis, so I'm happy to join you for this one. Nice room, by the way, at Treasure Island. You got that sweet life.
Yeah.
Upgrade action.
Yeah. So this is called taking lemons and making lemonade. So
Yes.
when I arrived at this hotel, my room wasn't ready, and they didn't have. They wanted to give me a smoking room, and like anyone who knows me knows, like I hate cigarettes. I hate the smell of cigarettes. I could never stay in a smoking room. So I said, "Listen, we need to do something about this." And they're like, "Well, we don't have any other rooms." And then when they saw that I was starting to get a little annoyed or angry, like somebody gets on the phone, and then the next thing I know, we're in the suite.
There we go. There we go.
May I offer you some complimentary champagne, my friend?
Yeah. You didn't want to stay at Bally's again after what happened last time? That's very strange.
Yeah, so
Very disloyal.
I know. Somehow Bally's managed to lose me as a customer. That whole situation was handled so poorly. I can promise you, I will never stay at Bally's again.
Wow.
Yeah, never. And
Hard
that's
to blame you.
I don't like to use words like never and always.
Right.
But in this case, I'm confident that I will probably never even set foot in there. But if I do, it won't be to go to my room because I won't have a room there ever.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The thing about staying in Las Vegas is it's much more pleasant to be here and not get burglarized.
That's a pretty hot take, man. I don't know. I don't know about that, but I think I can come to an agreement with you on that point.
Cool. I thought we were going to have a controversy on that one. So Jeff, you a lot of people know you because you're the affable kind of voice of PokerGo, but also what people may not realize is that you've had a good amount of success in poker, like at the table. You have over $200,000 in lifetime earnings, including last week when you final tabled a circuit event at Planet Hollywood. So what was that like?
It's good. I love the competition element of poker tournaments. So I try to play a tournament once every couple weeks or so. You might be familiar with having a fortunate run in the main event here and there. I feel like, Clayton, sometimes we just get on a hot streak, we catch some cards, and maybe we're like, I'm very, very slightly above average. Of course it helps because my job revolves around me watching the best players in the world play all of these hands throughout all of the different stages of tournaments, through early, through middle, through late. So you can't help but to pick up a lot from that. So whenever I have the opportunity, sure, I'll fire in some circuit events when the circuit comes to Vegas. I went to Canada a couple weeks ago to fire their WPT main because I want to fire, just one or two of those per year. In the summer, fire maybe 7 of the prelim events when I'm not working. And of course, me and you are lifers for the main event, right? Where we're going to be in that every single year.
If you ever don't see me in Vegas during the main event,
I'd be concerned.
I'm dead.
Yeah.
I promise. I'm dead.
I think that does it for you. So it's great. This specific tournament, of course, it's nice to run well and to at least think that I played well. And you're always extremely frustrated at the end when the end result is not a win, right? We play poker tournaments to win. Sure, the money is nice and the money increases and that's great, but like I just want to win. And so, you can't help but be disappointed. But when you look back at a fourth place finish in a circuit event, you're like, okay, sure, I'll take it.
I mean, that's really good. I mean, anytime theoretically, anytime we make money playing, we should be happy because you think about that tournament you played in had like 250 players or so. The chances that you're going to win it, even if you're twice as good as the average player, it's like 125 to 1, less than 1% chance that you're going to be happy. So I try to tell, I'm speaking as much to myself as I am to you, because of course
you had a run last week, right?
Yeah. And all competitors, we want to win. Like, of course, you want first place. You want the hardware, right? You want the glory. I'm not going to wear my circuit ring if I ever get one, but I'd like to have one.
Right, fair. Very fair. And, I think it's natural to think of these circuit fields as being soft fields. And sure, they are at some points and they are at some stops. But this Vegas one, when we were down, Clayton, at just 2 tables left, at my table was Dan Rabinowitz, Scott Stewart, and Dylan Wilkerson.
Those are names we know.
Yeah, that is not soft. So it's cool to be able to have the opportunity to compete with, some of just the really top level players out there. And I think you get that added element when you come to a series stop in Las Vegas.
For sure. But, all things being equal, if I'm going to pay $330 plus $70 rake to play a $400 tournament, I'm hoping that the field's going to be soft enough to justify that exorbitant rake. I've been harping on the rake for weeks. It's like ridiculous. It's gotten worse and worse. But yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about your results. You and I actually met in the main event, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But first, I want to say, I noticed on your Hendon mob that you have a first place finish and a second place finish in the $235 Rio Daily Deep Stacks. So why are you some kind of deep stack king? What's the secret?
I mean, those fields are interesting, to say the very least. We just credited the fields that are in the circuit events here in Vegas. The fields for the $230 Daily Deep Stack are not the strongest in the world, I would say. Right. But with that said, you run into a lot of strange players and strange plays that you just aren't used to in any way whatsoever. Now, of course, you just have to run like absolute God in these tournaments, right? To have a first place finish and a second place finish when there's 1,000 to 1,200 players, when it's a one-day tournament, blinds are going up every 30 minutes.
Turbo.
Yeah, they're effectively skipping levels, every 2 hours also, where you're making bigger jumps than you normally would make in even a circuit event. So part of it is running good. And then looking back to those final tables, I think everybody, in my limited experience at those final tables, is so concerned with laddering. And, I would say ICM, but I don't think they're thinking of things in ICM context. They're strictly like, oh, 7th place is, $1,000 more, but 6th place is $2,000 more than that. So if I can just fold, I can work my way up. And I think I was able to pounce on that and just stay super aggressive, and when I had 40 bigs and everybody else had 13 bigs, we're just going to try to run them over.
And they're going to try to outlast each other.
Exactly. So that's all that it was. So as long as you run super hot throughout the entire tournament and get to the final table, give yourself a chance with 30-ish bigs or so, I think it sets up pretty well for you to have a pretty good result.
Yeah, because when players with that mindset are playing that way, they're going to make so many folding mistakes. All you need is for them not to pick up a monster, and you're pretty much going to win the thing.
It's so true. I mean, for example, folds to us on the button, and let's say the small blind and the big blind have that 10 to 12 big blind range or so. And we just rip it in with, so much of our range. Let's say we have 30 to 40 big blinds. And so often, and I can distinctly remember this, that the big blind will look down at ace 5 or something, ace 5, I'll snap call in that kind of situation and just be like, oh man, the first card I looked at was good, but I'm definitely folding, and you're like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm like Queen 6 of spades or something. Yeah. That works for me. So there are so many scenarios just like that in one of these daily deep stacks that I think there is a little bit of value to those tournaments, even though it is effectively a super turbo.
Yeah. And so in one of your deep runs in the main event, staying on the World Series, it was maybe the most fun table I've ever been.
Same.
I mean, that table was ridiculous. Actually, where Jeff and I met, I don't remember. Do you remember what year that was? 15 or 16?
2015.
Okay, so
you have so many deep runs.
Well,
in the main that,
I didn't mean
it's
to. Yeah,
hard
sick brag. Which deep
Right,
run
right.
was it? Yeah, sorry everyone. I didn't mean it that way. I just couldn't remember the year actually.
2015.
Yeah, so in that year, unforgettable for me. I was third in chips with 100 players left, and at that really fun table where you and I met. That's the year that I picked up pocket kings on consecutive hands and went from third out of 100 to 96th place. So yeah, that was pretty brutal. And for a long time, I didn't want to ever see pocket kings under any circumstances, but I've gotten over it. And we all have similar stories, but how many of us have stories where, what was my equity in that tournament as one of the chip leaders with 100 players left and 9 million for first?
And also the odds of getting kings, back to back, and especially in those spots with the way those hands played out.
And losing with them twice.
Yeah, just astronomical odds. So when you combine all that into the mix, I wouldn't have blamed you if you just snap quit poker and just ran for the hills.
Yeah, I read on a poker site, somebody they posted like the poker news reporting of my two hands, and somebody wrote, if this happened to me, I would just kill myself.
Oh, okay. I mean, that is a little extreme. I don't know about that one.
No, you still get paid. There's a nice consolation prize, Anyway, what made that table really fun was just the personalities. We didn't get any TV coverage for that table, which to me, I think is actually a bigger regret than the way the cards kind of screwed me at the end, because our table was so much fun. We were laughing, we were playing. There was even some singing going on. You had a fun rail of some of your friends back home in Texas that had come out. My mother was there.
That.
And it was a super fun table with just a lot of fun-loving people who were ready to enjoy the moment and not just sit there with headphones and try to, fold my way to a bracelet or whatever. We had good action, but it was also just kind of a fun table and really a pleasurable experience. We didn't get on TV because Daniel Negreanu was still in the tournament.
Right. You said it. I think if you were to just walk past that table and view us for a little bit and not see the cameras, you would have never thought that we were down to 9 or 10 tables left in the main event of the World Series of Poker. You would have just never assumed that based on the jovial atmosphere that took place at our table. And our table was pretty strong. I mean, I know Toby Lewis was there for a little bit, and I like Toby Lewis a lot. I've become friends with, or at least I consider him a friend. He probably considers me as some random acquaintance of sorts. But I like Toby a lot. He's just one of these stone cold killers. I think Tony Tran was there, and looking back on his career, especially these last couple of years, he's really been an up and comer, especially on the WPT scene, I believe. So it was just a great mix of top level poker and pure entertainment. I mean, we realized that this opportunity doesn't come around so often, and so I think we all were able to enjoy the moment despite feeling an immense amount of pressure that comes with being that deep in the main. Absolutely.
And you impressed my mom. She still asks about you every time I come to Vegas. Like, did you see Jeff? Have you talked to Jeff? How's Jeff? So that, of course, was 2015, before there was even such a thing as PokerGo. And then fast forward a couple of years later, I was asked to do commentary for one of the first color commentary for one of the first streamed events. I think it was on Twitch, the year they did it on Twitch. And of course, I'm expecting to see David Tuckman when I walk into the booth because he was the guy. But it was before he came. He has a different schedule. So he misses usually the first few events every year. And so then I was like, there's my old friend, Jeff Platt. And, the PA or whoever is about to introduce us. And I'm like, you don't have to introduce me to this guy.
Yeah, what are the odds of that? I mean, that was, I believe, my second day of calling for the World Series. I just moved out to Vegas a couple months before. I was told, we might be able to use you. We're not too sure. I'm like, whatever, I'll just go for it. Anyways, and they're like, okay, you'll be working with, I think it was Jeff Gross and Bart Hansen on the first day, and then second day you'll be with Clayton Fletcher. I'm like, my man, this is awesome. And we were calling the 100K, right?
Yeah.
This was, I still think about that. an Elio Fox all-in that just shocked us both. And I don't remember the exact details, so I won't replay the hand because I don't want to botch it. But like the level of play that we were able to witness and broadcast when we had a huge audience on Twitch too, that was just a fantastic overall experience.
It was great to do that with you, but definitely, like, of all the events for me to do, I make no bones about the fact that I'm not on the level of the top players in the world. So we're watching Elio Fox and Jason Kuhn and David Peters, right? I mean, some of the best players on earth are in this $100,000 buy-in tournament, which took place right after the Super High Roller Bowl, I think. So like they were all like, playing all these big events, and there were several hands where the play was just over both of our heads, and the Twitch viewers were very happy to let us know that.
Yeah, I think that's always true, because in that Fox hand we're probably saying, well, he can only fold or call here, and then he just ships it. Yeah. It's just things like that. These guys were just so outside the box, especially. I feel like for that, the game constantly evolves. That's what we love about it, right? But in 2017. At that specific event, they really opened our eyes to a couple different things, and it's just the whole thing is fun. That's why I love covering poker tournaments and broadcasting poker tournaments. The storylines that develop throughout a tournament, the unique level of play that you see throughout, and also how that play changes from tournament to tournament. I just find it all captivating.
Yeah, well, for me, back in 2017, I had never heard of Elio Fox. He wasn't as well known at that time as he is now, of course. But I became a huge fan of his that day. And if you haven't, I'm sure it's still available online somehow. You can look that up. The 2017 100K WSOP High Roller. That was the one we did. Yeah, it was day 2. So yeah, that was super fun. And then we got a chance to do some more commentary together. And of course, we've become friends. So when I ran into the other day, shortly after you made that final table, I said, "Hey, why don't we do a podcast and maybe we can talk about some of the hands?" So, are you up for that?
Yeah, let's do it. It's an honor to share a hand with you on the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. I mean,
no, to me, I'm the one who's honored, because when you told me that you're a listener, I actually didn't believe you. I thought you were just being polite, but now I know you really do listen to the show, so I appreciate it. A lot of times, especially when I'm doing the ones where I don't have a guest, I feel like I'm literally just talking to myself, and then it gets posted online and no one listens. But then I find out that players that I admire and respect are listening as well. So that's pretty awesome. So this was the 6 max, correct?
Yes, this was the 6 max. It was a $400 buy-in, 2-day event, and like we've talked about, these circuit structures are not the greatest in the world. They're half-hour blind levels. They eventually hit the 45-minute mark. I think they hit 45 minutes at level 24. And day ones are 20 levels. And I'm like, guys, can't we start 45 minutes on day 2? Like, do we really need 4 more 30-minute levels? Like, can we just open things up a little bit? It's going to add an hour to your tournament, maybe, if that. But nope, they start at 24. So at this point in the tournament, the blinds are 400, 800 with an 800 big blind ante. I have about a 60 to 65K in chips, because I am the best, of course.
Naturally,
It was just all skill getting up to that. And,
so what was the average stack at that point?
I would say average stack at 400, 800. I think the whole tournament was still pretty deep, so I would say 50 bigs and 40K-ish stack. And that's what... It was probably less, actually, looking back on it. Probably a little less than 30K. It was probably less than 40 bigs. But my opponent in this hand had 50 bigs.
And you have about 75 big blinds.
Exactly.
Okay, and of course, I also like to translate to M for those who prefer M. So 8, 16, is that, no, 4, 8.
It was 4, 8, 8.
4, 8, 8. So there's 2,000 in the pot, and we have 60 in our stack, so that's pretty easy. 30.
Yeah.
M is 30.
We can do that math.
Yeah. I like when it's like doable in my head. Right. So your M is 30. By any measure, you are in healthy. You're above average. You have playability. Mm-hmm. This is where you want to be for as much of the tournament as possible, obviously. And how many players did you say were left at this?
Oh, I think at this point, registration is even still open.
Oh, okay, so it's still relatively early.
It's. Maybe there are 120-ish people left.
Okay. Do you think people are still buying in at that point? Registration's still open, but
I think a small percentage of the
Okay.
field. You know, a lot of these circuit grinders, if they have a below average stack, I mean, you know, they're just looking to get the chips in, go off to re-enter or try to run up a stack.
Right. So these events have unlimited re-entries. And we've been talking on this podcast a lot lately about, you know, kind of the controversy with the player of the year and should you be allowed to re-enter and all that kind of stuff. What are your kind of thoughts in general before we get to the hand here about re-entries? Do you think they're good for the game? Do you think they hurt amateurs? Just kind of your observations on re-entries or not.
Yeah, well, first, I heard you discussing Player of the Year last week, and I liked a lot of your ideas. As far as re-entry is concerned, I think it's good in moderation, and I think it's terrible when you just kick down the door.
Yeah.
And when you feature, you know, unlimited re-entries in any kind of a main event, let's say a circuit main event or WPT main event, it's just really going to hurt the amateurs. It's a common argument, but it's a good one. Like if an amateur fires this $3,300 event, let's say, and Dylan Wilkerson, I said his name earlier, is going to fire that one also, but Wilkerson is going to spend up to 5 to 6 bullets. Like it's just not fair for that amateur or those amateurs in the field to have to knock Dylan Wilkerson out of a tournament 5 or 6 times. Yeah, it's just not. Like I like, you know, the idea of a single reentry may be available. Even if there's a day 1A and a day 1B and you can fire up to 4 bullets total. I'm not completely opposed to that. I would love for all main events just to be one single reentry. Not all, of course. Some should be freeze out and freeze out only. I think the biggest tournaments of the year should always be a freeze out. I think that's just the fairest approach all the way around. Listen, you know, these casinos, these tours, they have to make money. We all understand that. They have to rake. Even you understand that.
The rake is going up and up and up.
It's just going to keep. So I understand why they allow reentry. Again, I just go back to this point. It has to be in moderation or you're going to ruin the overall experience for amateurs, which could really have an impact in the long run, which could hurt the tournament fields.
You would favor a cap on the number of re-entries, maybe 3.
Well, what I would favor is just one re-entry in tournaments. What I'm, you know, quote unquote fine with is one re-entry per day.
Got it.
And if there are other starting days, then
you can play it.
Yeah, then that's fine, whatever. So that kind of sums up my, you know, kind of confusing take on
we don't want to lose the fish, as it were.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, if Dylan wants to play 5 times, he's going to put a lot more money into the prize pool.
Sure.
And, you know, I strategically, it's going to be hard to beat him 5 times, so he will have a better chance of winning. But at the same time, he's also paid for that opportunity 5 or 6 times more than I paid as an amateur that's only going to fire once. Maybe I want a satellite. I don't have another 3,500 to play again, whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I could kind of see all sides of it, but I do miss the old days of rebuy, where they wouldn't rake the rebuy. You know, they want to do a rebuy tournament.
Never seeing that
We're
again,
never seeing
Clayton.
that again
Sorry.
because they're making way too much money on it. You know, if the players would come together, as we did when Venetian tried their little stunt a few months ago, and just not play those kind of tournaments, then, you know, if we, in other words, if we all agreed we're not doing this re-entry, like I already paid the rake, don't charge me again. But, you know, players want titles and players want to make money, so if they're not bending the rules, they're just going to continue to play. So, yeah, I definitely wanted to get your thoughts on that because I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, what's best for the game?
And in the World Series of Poker, I would like to see a strong cap used on reentry and have reentry not be available in a majority of the events. I understand for the $800 deep stack championship, whatever, you want to have people throwing some bullets. Sure, the Colossus, go ham on Colossus, whatever.
Crazy.
I mean,
20 buy-ins.
Go make all the money, go get all the, that's totally fine. You can go get all the rake from that one, but let's keep a sense of prestige in the World Series of Poker.
Not all bracelets are created equal, and none of them should really be for sale, especially the higher ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point and to a couple other people's points as far as Player of the Year is concerned, let's, like you said, you don't want to buy a bracelet. You also don't want to be able to buy points in Player of the Year, right? So if you min cash the Colossus on your 15th bullet and you get like 1 or 2 points as opposed to 48.
Right.
You know, like let's work on that a little bit too. I don't know. We could go on and on about Player of the Year stuff.
And
but I know
everybody
you did
has
that last
opinions
week.
on how to restructure it. But
Right.
there's no prize for it anyway. So until there is, maybe it doesn't really matter. But one thing that I heard Daniel say recently, and I do want to get to this hand, but I find this fascinating. Daniel says that the formula for Player of the Year is non-public. So you can't tell me until you get your points how many points you're going to get. That should totally be public.
Right.
Why is that a secret?
So the World Series stance on that is that, well, we give you a calculator. So you can calculate, how many points you're going to receive. And so everybody's like, okay, but can't we just have the formula that the calculator is using? And they say, no, the formula is ours. So it's very bizarre how that whole thing works. Everything needs to be fully transparent, fully public, which it will be for sure after this latest,
controversy.
Era that they have.
When the Golden Boy ended up having his title stripped from him. I'm still bitter. I love Daniel. He's a friend. But I'm still bitter about how our table didn't get on TV because he was on TV.
Oh, yeah. Damn you, Negreanu. God, that is so
we don't want to see the sportscaster and the comedian having fun.
I mean, what a dream combo. Come on.
Just because some guy named Negreanu is at the featured table?
One of the senior producer at now Poker Central, Dan Gotti, I still, give him some grief for that. I'm like, I did watch in 2015 when I was on for like 12 seconds. Yeah, I was there. I saw that. I saw those episodes. Thank you very much.
12 seconds more than I got, finishing 96th.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. So we have an M of 30. Getting back to your hand, you've got 75 big blinds?
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the action here?
So the button starts this hand with 40K. So he has 50 bigs. It folds around to the button, and the button I would describe as the kind of amateur you run into pretty frequently on the circuit. Not overly concerned with like stack size when it comes to his betting. Not a guy who's going to be thinking, I have the ace of spades on this board, so I block, X, Y, and Z. Just a pretty standard ABC player. Not saying he's bad, but just very ABC.
And I think that's pretty typical of the field in a $400 circuit event. Not bad players. I mean, they're not clueless. Like, they know the rules of the game and the basic strategies. But they're probably not thinking too much about, card removal and combinatorics and things of that nature. So
sure. So it folds around to him. He raises to 2,200 at 400, 800 blinds. So a little bit bigger than, we're used to seeing. And I'm in the big blind this hand. Small blind folds, and I look down at the 10-8 off.
Okay. Now, how much did you read into the fact that his sizing was above average for the table?
Nothing at all, because that was his go-to.
Oh, okay.
So he was in the 3x-ish range. Right. So sometimes it was 2,200 at that level. Sometimes it was 2,500 at that level. So
you didn't really see a pattern. But the typical raise of that table, just to be clear, was probably more like 1,800?
Yes, exactly.
All right, cool. So we have 10-8 off. Mm-hmm. And I don't see any reason to 3-bet. Mm-hmm. I think your hand's a little too strong, actually, to 3-bet. I want to see a flop against this player with this hand.
And I wanted to see a flop against that player with that hand. So I'm just calling, all day, every day there in that spot, I think. Yeah. I mean, like you said, we're a bit too good to 3-bet. There's no reason to go out of control in the big blind in this spot.
I do like to have some bluffs in my 3-betting range. Like, if I do 3-bet here, I'm going to make it pretty big with whether I'm bluffing or not. Like, he made it 22. I'd probably make it close to 8,000, maybe like 885.
Same. I've really started, not to go off on a huge tangent on pre-flop sizing, but when I'm 3-betting out of the small blind or big blind, like, I'm going to size it up pretty good. Like, I'm going to make it a 4x ish 3-bet, and that's just if there's me and the original raiser in the pot. Now, if there's a raise and a call, I'm going to size it up even more.
Add a little more that.
I've just, that's one thing that I've changed the most over, the last couple months, and being able to watch all these guys on the high roller scene, is that they really are sizing up their 3-bets. And so that's something I like to do.
I think part of that, and I don't mind spending a little time on this pre-flop. I know this hand's about to get more interesting, but this is kind of important, guys, because kind of the basic, fundamental, I guess, theoretical idea here is that the more polarized you are, the bigger your sizing should be, right? Yeah. So we're going to call with hands like 10-8, Jack-10, 8-7, 8-6. Like these are hands we're going to be calling with. So when we do 3-bet, it's going to be with a really big hand or something like Jack-Deuce, right? I'll put a few like just god-awful hands that I'm just hoping I can get through with a big 3-bet. So that's pretty polarized, right? It's either aces, kings, ace king, those type of hands, or it's like Jack 4, Jack deuce, right. 10 deuce, like horrible
that's the definition of polarizing right there.
And so, the computers have taught us, the GTO bots have basically figured out that the more polarized you are, and it does really make sense because you're representing a big hand, so you would want to make it bigger for value, so then you also have to have a few bluffs in there to balance. So when we 3-bet here, there's really no hand that I would make it like 6K with.
Right, and I completely agree with you there. And I also think that nowadays, at least in these circuit fields, and even in fields like the WT mains, like these 3Ks, 5Ks, that a 3-bet out of a small blind looks so strong when you don't really have to be that strong to three. Like I love 3-betting with a queen jack, for example, out of the small blind if there's a raise and a call before us. I just think that you're going to win that pot so many times. And it's like you were saying, I know this isn't either a really good hand or a really bad hand because out of the small blind, we'd be 3-betting those really good ones. Right. We'd probably just fold our really bad ones out of the small blind. We save our 3-bets with those for the big blind. But those kind of middling hands that you don't really want to play out of position that have a little bit of value, a queen 10 or a queen 9 of diamonds or something like that. I've really liked the idea of 3-betting them out of the small blind. I think it's a play that again looks really strong, and your hand does have plenty of playability moving forward if you do get called. So I just think that's something I picked up. I think I was looking at Nick Petrangelo's Upswing Lab, not to mention any other companies, of course, besides.
Okay, I'll just cut that part.
Yeah, besides Tournament Poker Edge. But, that's something that he speaks pretty highly on. So I just think that's an interesting dynamic to just consider in the small blind, and then you're probably going to whittle the field down to most likely heads up with you in the original raiser if you do get called. So instead of, playing Queen Jack out of position in a 4 or 5-handed pot, let's 3-bet it, maybe take it down there or go heads up against our opponent.
Yeah, and if you are called, like you say, you have a playable hand that you can figure out what to do on the flop a lot. Yeah, I think calling in that situation, depending on who the raiser and original caller are, may actually be a mistake because, playing against multiple opponents with a marginal hand like a Queen 10, it could end up being unprofitable to call, whereas folding is probably okay, but it might feel a little tight. So then 3-betting kind of becomes the best option. And in that particular instance, I don't think it's necessary to go quite as big because you aren't as polarized. So
sure, that's a great point.
Yeah, maybe a little bit less, but you still want to have it. You don't want to make it too easy on your opponents. If you make it 3x, you're basically offering 2-1. And they're going to call in position with almost everything. So you got to go a little bigger than that.
Yeah, I think we agree there for sure.
All right, cool. So let's get back to your 10-8. So here we call. And how much is in the pot before the flop here? We made it.
It's 2,200. We made the call. That's 4,400 plus that big blind ante, 5,200, 5,600 is in the pot.
So 56 in the middle. And the flop is?
The flop is 10, 10, 8.
Oh, so
is that good?
That's an above average flop.
I came here on this podcast for the analysis, Clayton. That's all I have listed in the notes. I just want you to tell me if that's a good flop.
Right. So instead of really getting into analysis of how to play poker, we're just going to talk about hands where Jeff Platt makes the nuts.
Yeah, this just shows that you just run good to move deep in circuit events.
Okay, I'm sure there's some reason why you.
There is a reason, but the reason is not now.
Okay, all right.
I'm guessing that you're able to guess what I did on this flop. I did not go all in.
I think we should go ahead and check.
Yes,
and the reasons, just quickly, leading doesn't make sense with any hand on this flop. Whether you have 10-8 or ace-jack or whatever you have, I don't think you should be leading this flop with any holding, especially not this one because you have all the cards worth having right now. So you might as well check and see if this guy will at least put out a continuation bet.
That's exactly what I did do, and that's exactly what he did do. He bet 2,500.
Okay, so 25 into 56. It's a pretty standard sizing for him.
For him,
yeah. And really, in his shoes, I think I would make the same sizing with all of my range. Like even if I flop trips, even if I had pocket aces, because you don't really need, you're not going to get action from very many hands that your opponent can have. So you want to try to get more of those hands to call, like a curious call with pocket fives. Like you got to think about, what am I value targeting? What can I get action from on 10, 10, 8 when I have two kings, right? Or, whatever his value range is. Like say, for example, he has kings. When he makes a bet, it's got to be a bet that you can call, and you probably don't have a 10 or an 8.
Sure.
Right? So what can you call?
Don't you also think, though, that I'm floating there with a lot of hands like, Queen 9, Jack 7,
Queen Jack.
My ace highs, my random ace highs, stuff like that.
Yeah, any kind of gut shot with an overcard. Like there are a lot of hands you can call with, but if I bet too big, you might just say, you know what, it's not worth it to call in this spot. I'm out of position. This guy's betting big. Like you don't want to tip him off that you have much. So because of that, again, for balance, when your opponent has something like ace high, ace queen or whatever, he needs to make the same bet as he would with kings, which should be a smallish bet. I think 25 is a good size.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think anywhere in that 2K to 2,500 range is pretty good for, again, a wide variety of your hands. So that's what he did. And what do you think I did, or what would you do in that spot? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in your shoes, I think calling is the play. You could go for the check raise and hope that he has an overpair and gets stubborn. But I think in doing so, you basically fold out everything that's not an overpair. And so that's why I think it's better to just check call here.
Yeah, it's like you, with a raise, you'd be specifically targeting jacks or better. And it's just so hard to put a guy on that small of a range,
right.
Especially the button raiser, or really anybody for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, all
nowadays.
we've seen is a button raise and a continuation bet.
Yeah.
It's hard to put such a tiny, sample there.
Exactly. So I do make the call. So now there's 11,600 in the pot. The turn is the 7 of hearts. So now there are 2 hearts on the board. So it's 10, 10, 8, 7 with 2 hearts.
Okay. And again, Hero has the top full house.
Yeah. Hero is very good at poker, so he flopped top full house.
Should I just call him Superhero?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. All right. So now this is a card you could consider leading, actually, I think, because...
Part of why I bring this hand up. But go ahead.
I like this spot here on 4th Street. The 7 of hearts comes off, which completes a few straights, brings a flush draw that wasn't there before. And with those kind of hands, I might check call lead some of the time when I have those kind of hands. Mm-hmm. So I also need to do it sometimes when I have the nuts, like I do now. So for that reason, I would balance here. I would kind of play a mix. I know listeners hate when we talk about a mix. Like sometimes do this, sometimes do that. Because okay, great, Clayton, but how do I decide which? I mean, you kind of have to randomize it. If you told me that you led this card, I wouldn't be mad at it. I also think checking again is perfectly fine. Just playing in flow and hoping that our opponent puts another bet out there.
Yeah, and that's what I did. I checked, but that's part of. The river will be more interesting, but that's part of why I found the turn interesting, because I'm like, I probably could lead here, and I'd maybe lead if I had like maybe Jack 10 instead of 10-8. I think that might be a cool spot to lead. And then like you said, flush draw, maybe I just lead here against this specific opponent and just get a lot of folds right then and there.
Yeah,
instead
when you
of spending
pick up some
more on
equity,
like a check raise or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but tell me about that Jack 10. Why would you rather do that with Jack 10 than 10?
So I feel like we're so nutted, obviously, because we effectively have the stone cold nuts. But I feel like, that just gives him so many, not so many more, but that gives him more of the 8-9s of the world. That gives him more of the ace-8s of the world. That just opens up the door with all of his 8s that he, it just adds some hands to a range that he's calling with.
That makes logical sense. And if anyone didn't follow that, let me just clarify. What Jeff is saying here is that if I don't have an 8 in my hand, mm-hmm. then that gives my opponent more combos of hands to call with. So leading on a Jack 10, leading with Jack 10 on this board would be more attractive of an option for Jeff, because he can get more action from more hands that include an 8.
Yes.
The fact that we have an 8 in our hand and we also see one on the board means that it's that much less likely that our opponent has an 8, which means that his total number of hands that he can even call a bet with is much smaller. So we're better off checking to him again and hoping he still has nothing, and wants to bluff with it again,
Yeah.
or better yet, has a strong hand that obviously can't be as strong as ours and will bet again, hoping to get more value from us, not realizing that we have this whole board locked up.
Exactly. So we did check, and he did fire, and this time he bet 8K with, again, 11,600 in the pot.
Okay, now that is a healthy bet right there. I mean, this is now we need to ask more questions about this player.
Sure.
So you kind of described him before as being like a pretty standard kind of $400 Planet Hollywood circuit 6 max player. So he's kind of playing in line with the field for the most part. How does the field generally construct its range for betting big on the turn after having continuation bet small on the flop?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like these circuit players that we're talking about, if they're betting pretty healthy on the turn, so, let me go back and say that so many of these players, I think, check back so often when maybe they shouldn't be. But I think like he's checking back a lot here. Like any circuit player, if they have ace king or something, let's say it folds around to them, they raise it up, flop comes 10-10-8, their opponent checks. They bet, like, if the turn is not an ace or a king, basically, like, they're like, okay, I'm done with this one, and we hope to get to showdown, and we hope to win.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
I see that
like,
over and over.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of those kinds of hands are just always checking back. Now, I should say, and it's something that I didn't mention at the beginning, but this player did seem more aggressive than your standard player. Sure, I guess ABC in the sense of pre-flop play, but maybe fires a little bit more than most.
So there's an adjustment.
Yeah.
So if we can start off by like just kind of taking like a control group, which is the field at large, and then here we're looking at the play of your opponent in previous hands. He doesn't always give up on the turn and check back with everything. So you're not necessarily assuming that this 8,000 is necessarily a big hand.
Right. Exactly. If, gun to my head, I would say yes, it's a really good hand. But leaving the door open versus some circuit players when they bet turn also, that he has a good hand for sure. That there are probably no bluffs in his range, maybe some semi bluffs with like the ace queen of hearts or something, and he turned to flush draw and keeps on firing. So this guy, capable of bluffing here, but more likely to have a good hand once we see that bet of 8,000. And when he bets 8,000, it's obviously important too. He has about 25K or so behind.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you feel that he feels pot committed?
Not at this point.
Okay.
No, I do not feel that way. I thought there were.
He's put in roughly 13 of his
40
roughly
to start.
40.
Yeah, so he's got about a touch over 25K.
Right. So the real question becomes how best to get the rest of those chips when he has it, when he has something that he's willing to get broke with, but also how best to get those chips when he doesn't have it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess the math here is, just at a theoretical level, like what are the chances that he doesn't have anything and that he's just like really trying to win this pot for some reason with this big, healthy, like turn bet. He's just trying to push you off of whatever you've been check calling with, right? Or how often does he actually have a value hand that he's willing to go to the felt with? I don't know. I mean, in his shoes, even with pocket aces, I would be concerned that my opponent is slow playing a 10 or a full house, right? And in this card is even worse news for my aces because you may have just made a straight.
Yeah.
Right? So this is a tricky one. I'm not sure everybody's going to just lose all their chips with pocket aces now, which means I don't think we can raise a bet. I just don't think we should raise. Even a minimum check raise is going to set off so many alarms in his head. And then you're just asking yourself, is this guy just going to go with it?
Yeah.
When I've just announced to him that he's beat.
Yeah, and that's in the end why I called. Why I just called, because like I just didn't see like it's very likely as a really strong hand here for all the reasons we just discussed, and it's very likely that those strong hands are jacks through aces, and if even aces are put in that tough of a spot there with this specific player after he sees a check raise, I mean, like I cannot really justify raising here. And even if we check min raise, that's effectively, he knows going to set him in. Yeah, it's committing him for sure. So I agree with you there that I just did not think that we could raise on this turn card, and so I check called here.
Okay, I like your play. So what happens next?
Okay, so the river comes the 9 of spades.
Okay.
So it's 10, 10, 8, 7, 9. The turn brought a second heart, but it's a rainbow board. River, 9 of spades. Our opponent has, again, about 26K-ish behind. We have 10, 8. We flopped a full house on a 10, 10, 8. The turn was a 7 of hearts. The river was a 9. On the flop, we check called 2,500. On the turn, we check called 8K.
8,000.
Yeah, so there's about 28,000 in this pot.
Okay. Here's the thing. He's got just under a pot size bet left in his stack. He's not going to put it in if we check unless he has at least a straight, right? We can agree that he's going to be afraid that he's beat when he has aces, kings, like those kind of overpair hands. They're not going to bet again. Mm-hmm. So we need to bet. Mm-hmm. And we need to bet an amount he can call so that we can accumulate more chips so we can continue to build our stack. Mm-hmm. So do we want to bet enough to put him all in when it's so obvious that there's 4 to a straight on the board and the board is paired? I think not. I think I would size down here and just try to get value. Also knowing that if he actually has a worse full house, he's going to raise that bet anyway. So
sure.
We're
fine. We get all those chips.
We get all the chips anyway when it's a cooler situation. Yeah. But I'm just wondering how to maximize versus big pairs. Also, I think the only thing that would bother me is if he has a jack in his hand somehow and I bet small and he just calls. Because there, if I had checked, he probably would have bet more. But I'm willing to fade the possibility that my opponent has a jack or 2 jacks, right? And I think betting like 10,000 here, he should call a lot with his aces and just be frustrated. But, he's be getting almost 4 to 1.
Yeah.
So he'd have to call with aces.
And he's calling. Yeah. And so that's exactly what went through my mind is obviously, we need to find the perfect amount that gives us this kind of max value. And if our opponent has a jack in his hand, it's going to be jacks like you mentioned, or there are some ace jack, king jack, queen jack of hearts there, right? That turn the flush draw that this opponent would always be betting on the turn.
And betting heavy too.
Yeah, and betting heavy and betting 8K. But, in my mind, I'm kind of going through if he has this big pair here, what do we do? And then I thought, does it have to be all of it versus, like you said, like a 10K size? Could it go a little exploitative here and bet in the middle of that where he would still have the value of your tournament life to a lot of these circuit amateurs who are not guys who are firing re-entry bullet after re-entry bullet, I think is maybe something that flies under the radar a little bit, and that if they can hold on to some chips, that those chips to them are a lot more valuable than they actually are.
Right. The fact that I'm not out, I can call and not be out.
I can call and not be out.
Yeah, so maybe a little bigger than 10.
Yeah, so I went with 23.
Okay.
When he has 26K in his stack. 26K-ish. So, looking back on it, especially after everything that we've discussed, I think that is too big. But I think those players call a lot with aces and kings right there. Because, it's the old I have aces, I can't fold aces.
Right, and then I have a story to complain to my friends about later.
And then I
can you believe how I lost with aces?
And then
the guy had 10-8. Can you believe it?
Right, and then that adds in, if he has a jack, then we're going to get a lot of chips.
Right.
So do you want to talk about that sizing, or do you want me to just go ahead and finish it out?
Yeah, I would say it's interesting to me. I think it is a little too big, but I think you have basically convinced me though that going a little bigger than 10 is probably more profitable than betting 10. So maybe the right number, if there is such a thing as a right number, might be 14.
Yeah. I think that's very fair to say. he, hemmed and hawed like we've seen from so many poker players. And then he finally...
Visit my website, foldfaster.com.
And then he does finally make the call. I show, and, he gave me one of those like, well, that's why I raise pre-flop, to get those kinds of hands out. I'm like, I'm really never folding this hand pre-flop. He did not show, and he tossed his cards into the muck.
So he called 23.
He called 23, and I would have assumed that this player is showing me the table if he had a jack, right? It's just like you see that, they're like, oh my God, I got so screwed on that river, because now I couldn't fold now that I had a jack. So it makes me think that he did call with queens through aces.
Yeah, I'm going to lean more towards aces. Yeah, because it just feels like that's the hand that he really can't fold. I mean, even kings, he'd be like, "Oh, you must have a jack."
Yeah.
Right?
I think so too. So right. It's like if you made each one of us guess, and we had to guess what he had exactly, we would have to say aces.
Yeah.
Right. That'd be the most favorable hand there.
So I guess the question becomes how much more often would he call with the 10,000 bet or the 14,000 bet? Or, did you just get lucky this time that he's almost always going to fold? Or is he always going to call? Because if he's always going to call, then maybe putting in 23 is perfect.
Then we go big. If these guys are always calling with the aces of the world there, then maybe we have to go big there. I mean, the headlines on the river here are we can just never check.
Right.
We can just never check.
Yeah, you absolutely have
we're
to
just
leave the river.
it's just too much of a prayer
Yeah.
that he has a jack, right?
Yeah.
Or that he has ace 10, which of course we block.
Yeah.
It's just too much of a prayer. Like we just have to be betting there. And then secondly, I kind of like the idea that I mentioned where against some guys, you can size it up bigger just based on the very simple outlook that these guys are like, okay, well, if I call and lose, I'm still alive.
Leave him a few
still
chips,
with a decent
little
amount of chips.
Chip in a chair, a little prayer.
All of that stuff.
Yeah.
So, all of that is not GTO, obviously. But I think when you're playing these $400 buy-in events, you can't be 100% GTO.
In fact, I think it's a mistake to play a GTO style against exploitable players.
Mm-hmm.
If the point of GTO is that your opponent is not exploitable, so you're going to follow a basic strategy that makes you unexploitable.
Mm-hmm.
But if you identify mistakes that your opponents make, you should exploit those mistakes. And I think even the most Doug Polk GTO thinkers in the world would agree with that. There's no reason to do what the book or the robot computer says when I know that I can actually make more money doing this other thing that's clearly the right choice.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, you just have to work in some plays that the solver would be horrified at, it just, that's what makes poker so great. Like if we all played like the solvers, it'd just be so boring.
Yeah.
But if we could use some live tells here and there, if we could gather some information on our opponent throughout the course of the day and use that to our advantage, I mean, that's what makes it fun. And, the level of competition is so high because all of your opponents are so different.
Absolutely. I want to make one other point about 23,000 versus 10,000 here on the end. If he only calls 23,000 half as often as he calls 10,000, it's still the right bet. Okay, so there's math there, and I'm thinking some of our listeners might not think in these terms because they want to get the more sure call. Yeah. But just because he's obviously going to call 10,000 more often than he's going to call 23,000. Everybody does, right? It's easier to call a smaller bet, obviously. We know that. And in tournaments, it's important to accumulate chips, right? It's not a cash game, so you do need to keep moving that stack up. So I might have bet 10,000, even if there's more EV to, if 23,000 gets called exactly half as often as 10,000, it's more profitable in the long run. But because accumulation is important, there's kind of a balance between those two factors.
And in a turbo tournament too, you want to make sure you get your hands on some chips.
You got to keep it going in the right direction, because before you know it, your above average stack is going to be an average stack, and it just because the blinds are coming so fast. Which, by the way, I don't mind. It's just a different strategy for these tournaments. Yeah, I'm not necessarily of the school that longer levels with every single possible blind level is good for the game. Like, we do at some point need to get this thing over with. It's only $18,000 up top. Like, do we need it to last 5 days?
No, please no. Please, for the love of God, no. Yeah. Thought it worked out fine. And like late play in this tournament was still deep.
It's deep,
average stack when we went to final table was about, I want to say 42 big blinds or so.
That's great.
Which is great, you know, and a $400 buy-in. So I was totally fine with this structure throughout. I mean, like I told you at the beginning, sure, I would have preferred day 2. Let's go ahead and make the switch from 30 to 45-minute levels, or maybe 40. But overall, I was pleased with it.
I wonder what the logic behind waiting till after level 24 is. I don't really know. The logic of the planning of some of these events is it escapes me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to sum that up. Yeah.
All right. So before we go, I know you have to run, but tell us about this game show. It's exciting. Is this breaking news here?
I mean, not in the technical sense, but I'll give you some of the scoop.
Scoop, yeah.
So every Monday and Friday on PokerGo, we release one new episode of The Big Blind. And The Big Blind is a game show that I host that merges the format from the traditional trivia show that we're used to seeing with a poker tournament. So our contestants are not only answering trivia questions, but they're also betting and raising and bluffing. And it creates this really interesting dynamic. We have an incredibly entertaining group of contestants led by one of your friends, Norm Macdonald.
I love Norm Macdonald.
The absolute legendary comedian. And by one of our enemies, Norman Chad, the World Series of Poker main event analyst. So
no comment.
You know, the $30 or $30 would be a pretty weak prize pool. Yeah. $30,000 in prize money awarded to our top 3. We have 6 different first round matchups featuring 3 contestants apiece. We go through a quarterfinals, a semifinals, and then the finals. I think, Clayton, to be honest, it's turned out really well. I've seen the finished product, and I think it creates a dynamic in which the audience can follow along too. You can participate effectively in the trivia questions. And then in our video finale against the house, it kind of reminds me of what me and you go through on this podcast with our hand recaps. You'll be able to put yourself into the shoes of one of the top players in the game, and we'll show you his hand, or, you know, we'll show you some other information, and you'll kind of make the decision, like, what does this guy do? What does Christoph Vogelsang do here on the river? Does he just check it back? Does he bet a third of the pot? Does he overbet here? And so I just think it's a cool concept. Our creator, John Bovenizer, deserves a lot of credit for coming up with it. And then Sam Simmons and the Poker Central team deserve a lot of credit for thinking outside the box. You know,
taking a chance on a new idea.
Yeah, this is totally unique. This has never been done before, never been seen before. So I'm just happy to be a part of it, and I think it'll be great.
So The Big Blind on PokerGo starting when?
Starting Monday, November 25th. So when you guys are listening to it, the first episode
will have aired.
Okay. You can catch all the episodes on demand. They are also being featured as a live event on PokerGo. So every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time, there will be a live airing of the broadcast.
How cool is that? Definitely, you guys want to watch that. The Big Blind featuring Jeff Platt. Now, are you the host of the show?
Yes,
okay.
Yes. I am the host of the show. You know, I try to keep everybody in line.
Good luck with those guys.
That's hard to do, especially considering one of our first round matchups features not only Norman Chad, but he's matched up against my good friend, Poker News presenter Sarah Herring, and Mike the Mouth Mattisau. So you can imagine trying to rein in both Mattisau and Norman. I just think it's entertaining. We have the Barstool guys. We not only have Barstool Smitty and Barstool Nate, but we got PFT for this one. And PFT's, you know, he's big time. And
very cool.
Yeah, for him to join us, that was huge for our show. And you guys will see a lot of your favorite poker personalities in there also.
Wow, what a great idea. Combining trivia and poker and putting the viewer in the driver's seat as well. I love it. I can't wait to watch The Big Blind on PokerGo. If you don't have a subscription to PokerGo, they don't cost that much. Do you have a code?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've always just wanted my own promo code. And for this game show, They did not give it to
Oh,
me. So,
all right.
but let's just say you can use the promo code Daniel. You know,
Of course you can.
That's Negranu's promo code. That'll get you, I don't know, a bunch of money
It'd
off.
save you $10 off an annual subscription to PokerGo. So, Jeff Platt, anything else you want the listeners to know before we say
No, I mean, just thank you for the opportunity to jump on with you. I always like talking with you, whether we're recording the conversation or not. So
Absolutely.
it's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, well, congrats on your new game show and congrats on your recent final table in the Planet Hollywood Circuit event. So that's going to do it for this week's episode, guys. If you haven't liked or subscribed or reviewed the podcast, what the hell are you waiting for? If you haven't signed up for your subscription to Tournament Poker Edge, you can get one for as low as $25 a month, which is just ridiculous considering the amount of content on the site. So you can get that just by visiting tournamentpokeredge.com. So for everyone here at TPE and for everyone here in Las Vegas, especially my dear friend Jeffrey Platt, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you all so much for listening.
Hold 'em like they do in Texas, please. Fold 'em, let 'em hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Luck and intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Poker face, poker face. Poker face, poker face. I wanna roll with her, a hard pair we will be. While little gambling is fun when you're with me. Russian roulette is not the same without a gun. And baby, when it's love, it's not rough, it isn't fun.